The room was submerged in the dim, weak light of a flickering neon bulb on the ceiling, the air thick with the smell of burnt beeswax, and an indescribably pungent herbal fragrance clung to the old patterned wallpaper that was peeling off in patches. Ethan clenched the photograph in his sweat-drenched palm. His breath was heavy and ragged in the eerie silence. Opposite him, seated behind a rickety oak table cluttered with glass jars, dried herbs, and strange objects, was an old woman. She had deep-set eyes as black as two cosmic black holes that bored into Ethan as if they could read every dark corner of his soul. Her white hair was tied in a high bun, revealing a forehead etched with the wrinkles of time and knowledge. The people in this Detroit neighborhood didn't call her by a specific name. They just called her the Old Woman, a place to turn to when prayers at church were no longer answered and the law was helpless. "Are you sure, young man?" Her voice was hoarse and dry like the rustling of dry leaves. "Once this path is chosen, there is no turning back. The price to be paid is never what you can foresee." Ethan looked up, his eyes flashing with a cruel and desperate light. He pushed the photograph forward, sliding it across the dusty tabletop. In the photo, a young man was smiling radiantly, his eyes sparkling with joy and confidence under the bright California sun. His brown hair was tousled by the sea breeze, and he wore the t-shirt of a high-tech construction company. That was Leo, once his closest brother. "I'm sure," Ethan gritted his teeth, "I want him to fail. I want him to be broke sick. I want him to come crawling back here without a penny to his name." His words hissed, filled with the venom of jealousy that had been nurtured for months. The old woman said nothing. She just silently picked up the photograph, her eyes narrowing as she examined it. Then she took an old quill pen and a piece of parchment. "Write his name here." Ethan tremblingly wrote the name Leo Martinez on the paper. The ritual began. The old woman chanted incantations in an ancient language Ethan couldn't understand. She burned a corner of the photograph, the ashes blowing onto Leo's name on the parchment. A thick gray smoke curled up, carrying Ethan's hatred and resentment, then dissipated into the stuffy air of the room. "It is done," she declared. "Now go. And wait." Ethan walked out of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a sick sense of release, but at the same time, a feeling as heavy as a boulder weighed on his soul. He didn't know that the curse he had just cast would not only fly across the country to find its victim, but would also plant its own wicked roots in his own life. It hadn't started like this. 3 years ago, Ethan and Leo were just two young men struggling to survive in the heart of Detroit. They grew up together in a poor, working-class neighborhood, where rusty old factories stood as monuments to a faded, glorious past, and each person's future seemed to be determined only by luck. Both were skilled electricians, but their certificates were like worthless pieces of paper in a city where there were more unemployed people than decent jobs. They lived in a rundown rented apartment, sharing every penny they earned from odd jobs here today, gone tomorrow fixing a switchboard for a grocery store, rewiring an old house, or sometimes working under the table on small unlicensed projects. Their evenings usually ended with a few cheap beers and big dreams. Leo, with his optimistic and never-say-die nature, was always the one who sparked those dreams. "Ethan, do you think we'll be stuck here forever?" Leo asked one cold October night as they sat on the worn-out sofa, looking out at the gray cityscape through the dusty window. "I have a feeling there's another world out there, a place where our skills are actually valued." Ethan took a sip of beer, its bitterness spreading in his mouth. "Where is that world, Hollywood? You know, here having a job, having money to pay the rent, is already a victory." "No, I'm not talking about movies," Leo replied, his eyes lighting up. "I'm talking about Silicon Valley, San Jose, California. They're building the future there. Smart buildings, huge data centers. They need people like us, people who really know their stuff. I've been reading about it. The salaries there, it's unbelievable." Ethan just scoffed, a smile tinged with fatigue and doubt. "That's a pipe dream, Leo. We don't even have enough money for gas to drive all the way there. Besides, who would hire two nobodies from Detroit? But if we don't try, we'll never know." Leo insisted. "I want to build something big, Ethan. Something that will last forever. Don't you imagine we could buy a house there with the money we make? A real house." A silence fell. Silence. The thought was tempting but also terrifying. For Ethan, Detroit was a familiar battle. It was tough, but he knew the rules. California, on the other hand, was another planet, a place where he was afraid he would be swallowed whole. He just shrugged, trying to force a smile. The following days continued as usual. But Leo had changed. He spent hours every night in front of his old laptop searching for information, sending his resume to dozens of companies on the West Coast. Ethan still thought it was just a fleeting fancy until one morning. "Ethan, wake up. Wake up." Leo shook his shoulder, his voice breaking with emotion. "Look at this." Ethan rubbed his eyes, squinting at the computer screen. It was an email from Quantum Construct, one of the leading tech construction companies in San Jose. They had responded to Leo's application. They wanted a video interview. "See, I told you," Leo shouted, unable to hide his joy. Ethan smiled, but something in his eyes had imperceptibly changed. "Congratulations, my brother. Really, you deserve it." But in the darkness of his soul, a tiny, ugly seed of envy had begun to sprout. Leo aced the interview. A few days later, he received an official job offer. He shared the good news with Ethan, whom he considered not just a friend, but a brother in adversity. A soulmate. He shared everything from secrets and plans to dreams. That evening, they walked along the Detroit River. The city lights glittered on the water, but they seemed dim and sad. Ethan suddenly stopped. "Hey, Leo," he said, his voice low. "If you go, will you forget me?" Leo laughed, not understanding his friend's anxiety. "Never. We'll always be side by side, you hear me? I'll come back for you. I promise." But Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the river, his hands clenched into fists. That night, as Leo fell asleep, his mind filled with hope and plans for the future, a figure silently slipped into the room. Ethan stood in the darkness staring at his sleeping friend, and in his eyes glinted a flicker of hatred. He whispered through gritted teeth, "We'll see if you really succeed. We'll see." 2 weeks after Leo left, the Detroit apartment became oppressively quiet. His absence not only left an empty bed, but also sucked the air and life out of the small space. For Ethan, the silence was a constant mockery, a reminder of his own stagnation. He still did the same odd job, still faced the piling bills, still languished under the gray streetlights of a city that seemed to have been forgotten. In the first few months, life seemed to smile on Ethan's bitterness. Leo's calls became less frequent, and his voice on the phone always sounded tired. He spoke of long, lonely nights of work pressure, of feeling lost in a strange city. Every complaint from Leo was a toxic tranquilizer for Ethan. He felt a twisted satisfaction, secretly wishing that Leo would fail, that he would soon have to pack his bags and return to the harsh reality of Detroit. "I told you so," he would mumble to himself after each call. "The world out there is not for dreamers." But then things started to change. After a few months of struggle, Leo finally found his footing. His voice over the phone became more confident, full of energy. He began to talk about exciting projects, new colleagues, and how the company appreciated his skills. And then the pictures started to appear. They came like a slow but steady flood, drowning Ethan in the success of his old friend. First was a picture on Instagram, Leo, in a hard hat, smiling brightly with a huge construction site of glass and steel skyscrapers in San Jose behind him. Under the golden California sun, he looked like a completely different person, someone who belonged there. Ethan stared at the picture, feeling as if an invisible hand was squeezing his heart. Then there were other pictures. Leo with his colleagues at a noisy bar holding an expensive craft beer, looking completely at ease and integrated. Leo in his new apartment, small but clean and bright, a world away from the damp slum they used to share. Every picture, every cheerful status update was a knife twisting in Ethan's bleeding self-esteem. The jealousy, at first just a dull ache, had now grown into a hideous monster gnawing at his soul day and night. Ethan sat in his dark room, the phone in his hand becoming a gateway to his own personal hell. He scrolled through the images of Leo's new life, his jaw clenched. "Who does he think he is?" he whispered in a ragged breath. "He thinks he's made it." Then one night, while scrolling through Leo's Instagram story, he froze. It was a picture that made the rage inside him explode. The photo showed a newly poured concrete foundation on a spacious plot of land in a quiet suburb just outside Detroit. The short caption below read, "Thank God dreams are slowly taking shape." Ethan felt the blood rush to his head. He gripped the phone so tightly, the screen seemed about to crack. A house. Leo was building a house, right here near where he was rotting in poverty. This was no longer success in a distant place. This was a blatant display, a declaration of victory right in his face. "He wants everyone to know how successful he is," he hissed. "He wants to show off to everyone." Ironically, on the surface, Ethan still played the part of a good friend. When Leo called, his voice full of excitement as he talked about his house plans, Ethan still managed to sound cheerful. "That's great, man. You deserve it." But inside, a storm was raging. Days turned into months and months into years. Ethan was still stuck in his quagmire. The odd jobs became scarcer, and the harsh Detroit winter made everything even bleaker. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Leo's empire continued to be built both literally and figuratively. Ethan followed the construction of the house through Leo's posts like a torturer watching his victim. He saw the wooden walls go up, then the roof being tiled. He saw the gleaming glass windows being installed, and finally the fresh coat of sky blue paint that adorned the house. Each new update was another dose of poison injected into his soul. Congratulations flooded in under each of Leo's posts. But Ethan no longer commented. He just watched in silence, his heart growing heavier. He had become a shadow in the life of the person he once called a brother. 3 years had passed since the day Leo left. 3 years of Ethan watching someone else shine, 3 years of him swallowing his own ashes. Leo's house was now complete, a solid symbol of everything Ethan didn't have. Then one November morning, as Ethan was sitting in his kitchen staring at an overdue electricity bill, his phone vibrated. A message from Leo. His heart skipped a beat. He opened the message and the words on the screen appeared like a verdict. "Hey man, guess who's coming home for Thanksgiving? I want to live it up with you like the old days. I'm coming back." Ethan read the message over and over, a cold, sinister smile slowly spreading across his lips. Detroit hadn't changed, and neither had he. "This time," he whispered to himself, "we'll see who has the last laugh, Leo." Detroit Metro Airport buzzed in a chaotic symphony of crackling announcements, the clatter of rolling suitcases and overlapping conversations. Ethan stood amidst the crowd, trying to force a smile as he saw the familiar figure of Leo approaching him. Leo looked different. He was no longer the skinny, tired young man of 3 years ago. The California sun seemed to have soaked into his skin, giving him a healthy, tanned look. He walked with a confidence Ethan had never seen, wearing a simple designer jacket and expensive sneakers. He was no longer the brother in adversity. He was the embodiment of a world Ethan could only see through a phone screen. "Ethan," Leo exclaimed, throwing his arms around him. His hug was tight and warm, but Ethan only felt his body stiffen. "God, it's good to see you, man." "Welcome back," Ethan replied, patting Leo's back, trying to make his voice sound natural. "Look who's back, the hero of Silicon Valley." They both laughed, but there was no warmth in Ethan's eyes, only a cold, sharp tension. The next few days passed in a charade. Ethan played the part of the hospitable host, the happy old friend. They went back to the old dingy bars, drinking the cheap beers they used to love. For Leo, it was a nostalgic trip. He happily recounted the difficult early days, the times he almost gave up, and now the sweet rewards. "You know," Leo said one evening as they sat in a familiar diner, "sometimes I still can't believe it. The salary, the benefits, the projects, it's all like a dream." He pulled out his wallet, an expensive-looking leather one, and paid for the meal with ease. "Hey, if things are too tough here, just say the word. I can introduce you to HR. or I can lend you some money to tide you over." The offer was made with good intentions, but to Ethan it sounded like charity. Pity. It was the last straw. The smile on Ethan's face froze. "Thanks, Leo. I'm fine." That night after Leo had fallen asleep in the living room, Ethan sat in front of his laptop. The apartment was dark, except for the faint blue glow from the screen illuminating his hate-filled face. "He pities me," he muttered. "He thinks I'm a failure." A sinister plan fueled by frustration and jealousy began to form in his mind. He didn't need a gun or a knife. His weapon would be words sent in the silence of the night. He opened his web browser and typed "quantum construct." After a few minutes of searching, he found what he needed: an email address for reporting ethical issues and employee misconduct, an anonymous channel for employees or outsiders to report violations. Perfect. His hands flew across the keyboard, typing each word carefully, like a craftsman making a poison-tipped arrow. "Dear Quantum Construct, Human Resources and Compliance Department, I am writing this letter as a concerned citizen who wishes to remain anonymous. I am compelled to report a serious matter concerning one of your employees, Mr. Leo Martinez. I have reason to believe that Mr. Martinez used falsified electrical certifications and licenses in his job application. This misinformation is not only a serious breach of professional integrity, but also poses a potential safety hazard to the projects your company is undertaking. As a leading company in the high-tech construction industry, I trust that you will not ignore a fraudulent act that could damage your reputation and the safety of your clients. I urge you to conduct a thorough internal investigation into this matter. I am confident that the truth will be brought to light. Sincerely, a concerned individual." He reread the email several times, each word chosen to sow doubt and cause maximum damage. He moved the cursor to the send button. For a moment he hesitated. But then the image of Leo, the new house, the confident smile and the pitying offer flashed in his mind. He clicked. A sick sense of power washed over him. "There," he whispered, "you won't be able to go back there again." The remaining days of the Thanksgiving holiday passed in suffocating tension for Ethan. He constantly checked his phone, hoping for a sign that his plan had succeeded. A frantic call from Leo. A termination notice. But there was nothing. Not a word from the company. Not a summons. Not even an investigation. Leo remained completely oblivious, happily enjoying his last days at home. The long wait felt like a punishment for Ethan himself. Then the last morning finally came. Leo pulled his suitcase to the door, smiling. "Ethan, my flight is tomorrow. We'll see each other again soon, man." Ethan tried to force a smile, but his face was stiff. "You'll be back soon. Detroit won't be the same without you." "I promise," Leo said, slapping him on the shoulder. "And next time, it's your turn to visit California. Seriously, think about it. We could build an empire together." A few hours later, Ethan saw Leo off at the airport. As the plane took off, carrying the man he both hated and envied back to his successful life, Ethan felt a terrifying emptiness. His arrow had been shot, but it seemed to have missed its mark. He drove back to the empty apartment, his hatred and sense of failure merging into one. His plan had failed. Ethan sat alone in the darkness, his mind reeling. He remembered the dim room, the smell of burnt beeswax, and the deep-set eyes of the old woman. If human laws couldn't punish Leo, then perhaps he had to put his faith in another law. One that was ancient and far more cruel. The curse he had paid to have cast. It was his only hope left. The California sky was still as blue and brilliant as ever, but for Leo, the world seemed to have turned a shade of gray. Since his return from Detroit, everything began to fall apart slowly but surely. At Quantum Construct, the job that was once his pride and joy had become a minefield. The technical drawings he used to read with ease now seemed confusing. A small miscalculation on his part caused a short circuit, delaying a portion of the project for several days. His supervisor, a man named Davies who had always held him in high regard, now looked at him with suspicion. The atmosphere in the team grew heavy. Next, his health began to decline. It started with a dull headache, which then developed into a persistent, lingering fever. The doctors couldn't find a cause. Just a strange virus, they said, prescribing him medications that seemed to have no effect. He was plagued by splitting headaches, and a bone-deep fatigue clung to him, making getting out of bed each morning a battle. His savings account melted away quickly. Medical bills began to pile up. Being forced to take time off work due to illness caused his income to plummet. Soon, a late rent notice was taped to his apartment door, a cold threat of eviction. One evening, in a fit of desperation, sitting alone in his dark apartment, Leo picked up his phone and dialed Ethan's number. He needed to hear a familiar voice, a little comfort from home. "Ethan!" Leo's voice was hoarse and weak. "Leo, what's wrong? You sound strange." Leo couldn't hold it in any longer. He poured out his heart, his voice breaking with pain and confusion. "Ethan, I don't understand. Ever since I got back here, it's like everything is against me. I'm in trouble at work. I'm sick and my money is running out. It's like there's some invisible force pulling me down." On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. Ethan took a deep breath, and when he answered, his voice was low-laced with a false sympathy. "Listen, man. You know, in our neighborhood, there are people who don't like to see others succeed. When you rise too fast, they'll find a way to pull you down. That negative energy, that jealousy, it's real, Leo." Leo was silent, Ethan's words planting a cold seed of doubt in his heart. "But you have to be strong," Ethan continued, his voice full of sincerity. "Don't let them get you down. You're a fighter, Leo. Remember that?" After hanging up, Leo sat motionless in the dark. Ethan's words about people who don't like to see others succeed replayed in his mind. But then something deep inside him resisted the idea. He remembered what his mother used to say when he was a child. "When all seems lost, stand up. Never let fear chain you." That night, for the first time in years, Leo knelt by his bed. He didn't pray to find an enemy. He just prayed for more strength. In the days that followed, he began to fight back. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he found a small community church near his home where he found comfort in the sermons and the warmth of strangers. He wasn't looking for a miracle. He was just looking for the peace to keep fighting. His faith, instead of wavering, grew stronger. He knew that even in the darkest moments, the light would eventually break through. And then slowly but surely, things began to improve. His fever broke. His energy gradually returned. He went back to work with a new spirit, more cautious and focused. He discovered a critical flaw in another contractor's design, a flaw that could have caused a disaster if it had not been caught. Supervisor Davies called him into his office not to reprimand him, but to thank him. That evening, Leo called Ethan, his voice vibrant with life. "Man, God has set me free. Things are looking up again. You can't kill a righteous man, not when the light is still watching over him." On the other end of the line, Ethan listened in silence, a bitter taste spreading in his mouth. "That's great, Leo. That's great," he mumbled, his voice choking. But in the darkness of his room, he understood. His curse, his poison-tipped arrow, had been blocked by something he could never defeat: a pure heart. Life is sometimes ironic. A few months after Leo had weathered the storm, Ethan was still drowning in a quagmire of failure and hatred. The curse hadn't worked. His scheme had failed. He was left alone with emptiness and bitterness. One morning, as he was aimlessly browsing job search websites, an automated email appeared in his inbox. The subject line caught his attention. "New job opportunity from Quantum Construct." He frowned about to delete it. It must be a mistake, a bitter reminder of Leo. But something urged him to open it. It was a job posting for a senior electrician position at the San Jose headquarters. The company was launching a major expansion project and was specifically looking for people with experience working with older systems in the Midwest to integrate with their new technology. The job requirements seemed to be written specifically for him. Ethan sat frozen in front of the screen. A skeptical smile slowly formed on his lips. He couldn't believe it. Months ago, when Leo was still trying to help, he had sent him a link to Quantum Construct's career page and said, "Just sign up for notifications, you never know when you might get lucky." Ethan had done it half-heartedly and had forgotten all about it. And now that opportunity was right in front of him. The door to the world he both hated and coveted, Leo's world, had suddenly opened. He stared at the apply button, his heart racing. For a moment, all his jealousy, hatred, and guilt seemed to vanish, leaving only one question echoing in his mind. What would happen if he was actually chosen? San Jose Mineta International Airport was a whole different world, clean, modern, and flooded with natural light. When Ethan stepped out of the baggage claim area, he felt like he had just set foot on another planet. He squinted at the bright California sun, the kind of sun he had only ever seen through a phone screen. And then he saw Leo. Leo was standing there, smiling, brightly waving. "Hey, champ, welcome to California," Leo shouted, stepping forward and embracing Ethan. Ethan tried to return the hug, but his body felt heavy. Leo's face beamed with joy, while Ethan felt ashamed and guilty. He couldn't look his friend in the eye. The first few days were a whirlwind of reunion excitement. Leo took Ethan everywhere, showing him the famous landmarks, the good restaurants, and introducing him to his colleagues. Ethan was hired by Quantum Construct. It was Leo who had vouched for him and recommended him to management, saying he was one of the best electricians I've ever known. Those words were like a knife twisting in Ethan's conscience. They worked together. By day they were colleagues on the construction site, and in the evenings they returned to Leo's apartment where Ethan was staying temporarily. The close friendship seemed to have been reestablished, but that closeness no longer had the sweet taste of the past. Ethan often caught Leo lost in thought, his eyes distant, his smile sometimes extinguished by a shadow of memory. Ethan's decline did not come suddenly. It was like a chronic illness, slowly eating away at him from the inside. His health began to fail. The headaches that Leo had once endured now plagued him. A persistent cough that wouldn't go away woke him up in the middle of the night. He felt a constant, bone-deep fatigue. The doctors couldn't find a cause, saying it was due to stress and the change in environment. At work, mistakes began to happen. A wiring diagram was misread. A safety device was installed incorrectly. Small errors, but they accumulated, earning him a warning from Supervisor Davies. Davies looked at him with the same scrutinizing gaze he had once given Leo. He said nothing to Leo. He was drowning in shame and resentment. Why could Leo overcome it, but he couldn't? One evening, Leo came home to find Ethan sitting alone in the dark. "Ethan, you disappeared all evening again. I can see you're not well. Are you sick? Do you need money? Tell me I can help." Leo's concerned voice once again ignited Ethan's pride. He snapped, "Leave me alone, Leo. Not everyone is as lucky as you. It's a fight out here. Maybe it's my turn to struggle." Ethan tried to push Leo away, but Leo persisted. "No, I won't leave you alone. I know what that feels like." In the following weeks, Ethan's downfall accelerated. His savings ran out. He was transferred to a less important project after a serious mistake. The new friends he had made gradually drifted away. Soon he had nothing left. One night, in a fit of panic and fear, he rummaged through his old phone contacts and found the number of the old woman in Detroit. With a trembling hand, he made the call. "Mistress, it's me," he whispered. "I've lost everything. I'm willing to pay any price. Please help me out of this." The old woman's hoarse voice came from the other end of the line, cold and cruel. "The price to be paid is never what you think. The curse you cast on another because it failed to fulfill its mission has returned to you. You want to save your life, then go home, just as you wished for your friend in that ritual." She hung up. Ethan was stunned. He belatedly understood that ill wishes spoken in the darkness always came with a price, and the seeds one sows will eventually sprout in one's own garden. A few months later, Ethan quietly packed his bags. He left California without a word of farewell to Leo, his heart heavy with failure and regret. The humid heat of Detroit enveloped Ethan as he stepped out of the airport. The country hadn't changed, but he had returned a broken man, his mind in a turmoil of regret. Memories of California flashed through his mind. He dragged his single suitcase, the evidence of a faded glory. No one was waiting for him. No one called his name. Even Leo's voice had become a distant memory he no longer dared to touch. He rented a shabby room in an old neighborhood, paying with his last crumpled dollar bills. He began to wander the city, searching for a familiar face, a helping hand. But old acquaintances avoided him. Odd jobs didn't come his way. And at night, the illness returned. Fever, cold sweats, sharp pains in his chest. One morning, as Ethan sat in his empty room, his phone vibrated. Leo's name appeared on the screen. Ethan's heart seemed to stop. He hesitated for a moment, then shakily answered the call. "Ethan, it's me." The voice was still warm, familiar as ever, but there was an unusual urgency to it. "Man, are you okay? Where are you? I've been trying to reach you, but I couldn't. I even went to your apartment, but they said you'd moved out." Ethan stammered, searching for a lie. I'm in Detroit. I had to come back. It was an emergency, though. I didn't have time to tell anyone." On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. Then Leo spoke, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Really, I was surprised. I thought everything was going well for you in California. Do you need anything?" Ethan hesitated, his throat tight. "No, I'm fine," he replied in a weak voice. "I just need some time. It'll pass." "All right, man," Leo said. "If you want to talk, you know where to find me. I'm always here." The call ended, leaving Ethan alone in the room. One morning he gathered what little strength he had left and went to the old woman's house. "You've returned," she whispered in a dry voice. Ethan knelt down, pleading. "Mistress, everything has left me. I've lost everything, even my health. Nothing is going right. I beg you do something." The old woman shrugged, indifferent. "This is no longer in my hands. The spirits have claimed their debt." She closed her eyes, murmuring, "There is no shortcut for one who has cursed the righteous. The misfortune will follow you forever. Perhaps you should just confess the truth, who knows?" Ethan staggered out, his anguish clinging to his skin. A few days later, with a trembling hand, he dialed Leo's number. "Ethan, is everything okay?" Ethan's throat tightened. An awkward silence hung in the air. Then, in a choked voice, he whispered, "Leo, I need to talk to you. I need to tell you everything." Leo sat down on his bed, surprised. "I'm listening, man. Tell me what's tormenting you." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling his heart was about to break. He told him everything. The email to Quantum Construct. The evil curse cast by the old woman. The silence on the other end of the line was cold, stretching on for an eternity. Leo felt his breath catch in his throat. The painful memories of those unlucky months came flooding back like stabs of a knife. He closed his eyes, unable to speak. Ethan, on the verge of a breakdown, burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Leo. I'm sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness, or even your pity. I've lost everything. I have nothing left. The spirits are haunting me. I just wanted to be like you. But look where I've fallen." Leo's voice trembled at first, broken, almost inaudible. "You hurt me, Ethan. A pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. You destroyed our friendship, but I don't want hatred to win." He took a deep breath, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I forgive you, Ethan. Not for you, but for me. Because I believe that only God can break those chains. I want you to go to a church to free yourself from this darkness." A choked sob escaped Ethan's throat. He couldn't believe it. "You really forgive me, after everything I've done?" Leo let a long silence hang heavy with pain, but also with hope. "Yes, Ethan. It's over. Let God lift you up. And one day come back to me, but as a free man, not a shadow." The call ended. Ethan cried, crying his eyes out. A few days later, he walked into a small church at the end of the street. Later, Ethan did not regain the material wealth he had lost, but he found something much more precious: peace of mind. He became a new person, humble and grateful. He slowly tried to rebuild his life. And above all, he learned to love and never to let jealousy poison his soul again. Because jealousy and betrayal only lead to the destruction of the one who nurtures them. But even in the deepest darkness, repentance and forgiveness always open the path to liberation and rebirth.